Hello everyone, welcome to Carnivorous Plants Hub. Thank you so much for stopping by. Today we're going to be doing some Venus flytrap propagation. We're going to be cutting these flower stalks here and propagating them. So I'm going to be showing you that process and how to do this. This is kind of a cool one because these are all cultivars. There's no typicals here, so it's going to be kind of fun to see if we can clone some of these cultivars here. I got my A2 Fang, got the DCXL, B52, and then also UK Sawtooth over here. I was looking at my UK Sawtooth, and although it has 5 flower stalks, I think I'm going to hold off on that one just a little bit, let those grow just a little bit longer so I can get a little bit more out of them. Before I cut that, all these plants are pretty healthy. Even though they are kind of in the beginning of dormancy, they've been in dormancy for about 3 weeks now, so if you want to cut these off, I don't really need to cut them off. I think they're fine since they're super healthy Venus flytraps. However, I do want to go ahead and start cloning some of these, so that's why I'm cutting these flower stalks for propagation. One thing that's pretty cool to kind of tell you about flower stalk propagation, and it's important for people to understand, is there's 2 ways you can really propagate Venus flytraps. That's with the actual leaves here. You can take these leaves off with a little bit of the rhizome attached, and you can put those in some peat moss perlite mix, and then you can also do it by cutting the flower stalks. So that's pretty cool. One thing you can also do is you can let these seed, and they'll actually cross-pollinate with each other, and you can also get seeds and grow them from seeds. Now, the thing with seeds that's different from the flower stalk or the leaf cutting is that the seeds are not necessarily clones. So if you use seeds from these, you actually can't label them as a cultivar. Technically you can, but you're not really supposed to because they're not technically clones of the plant, so you're really not supposed to label them as a cultivar. They're technically just typical since they're just seeds, and you can get a lot of genetic variations from seeds. So the cool thing about these flower stalks, if you cut these off, you definitely get clones of all these plants, so you can label it as a clone, or you can say this is a DCXL. So I will be kind of labeling these so we know which one's which. So that's pretty cool. One thing too, I'm going to talk about the preparation here in just a moment. We're going to talk about these pots here, what I went through to prepare these. I'm going to talk about my entire process so I can help you guys do this. A lot of people have the question, should I cut my flower stalk off? Now, first off, before I get into that too much, I do have an entire video dedicated to that subject. So check out the link in the description after this video is over to see more in depth on whether or not you should cut off the flower stalk. But the reason I mention that is if you do decide to cut off your flower stalk, most people just kind of throw them away, and they don't realize that they can actually put them in some peat moss and they can clone them. So it's really kind of a cool thing. If you're going to cut off the flower stalk for the health of your plant, you might as well throw them in some soil and see if you can get them to grow. Real quick, I did want to mention, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm trying so hard to open my own carnivorous plant nursery someday. Maybe these are going to be some of my first plants that I'm actually able to sell, some of these clones. So this is all sort of part of my process. I appreciate you being here so much, and I just want to thank you. It means the world to me. If you could subscribe to my channel, like this video, that's pretty cool if you do that, because then as I give updates on these, you'll be able to see the progress. I'm not going to have much progress today because I'm doing this live. So in like 30 days, 60 days, when they start actually sprouting Venus flytraps, you'll be able to see the update on that because you're subscribed to my channel. So it's kind of a good reason to do it. Also, real quick, I have a really cool plant tracker and Venus flytrap care sheet that's a free download if you go to my website, carnivorousplanthub.com/plant-tracker. I'll have a link in the description for that. So if you want a free plant care sheet or free plant tracker and free Venus flytrap care sheet, go check that out. Link in the description. But let's go ahead and talk about these Venus flytraps real quick. One thing I want to note before we get into this process that I think is really important for everyone to understand is that cloning Venus flytraps, growing them from seeds, it's really not a fast process. And I want to sort of temper everybody's expectations on what they kind of understand and how this is going to go for them. So I wanted to bring these over real quick. So I have some clones right here that I did. You can see the video where I did this entire process. I have these all up, so if you want to go into my archives, check them out. I'll throw them in the description for you so you can see them. But these are about 9 months old. So you can see after 9 months, let me get my finger in there so you can see about the size here. You can see they're not very big. This is, I think this is the B52 over here. I can't remember if it's a B52 or DCXL. I'll probably have to actually go back to the video to remember, but it's either a B52 or DCXL, and this one over here is definitely the UK Sawtooth. So you can see after 9 months or so, they're really not too big. They're still pretty small. So I just kind of wanted to show you this so you have an understanding of what to expect within that first year. They don't get very big. They're kind of small, but it's, you know, it's cool. You kind of let them be, and you don't have to put them through dormancy in their first year. So that's kind of a cool thing. So you don't have to worry about that. You get to kind of watch them grow and leave them there, which is a lot of fun. I'm actually going to get in a little bit closer to these for you so you can see them a little better. Yeah, but that's definitely one of the pros of a Venus flytrap in its first year, is that you don't have to put them through any kind of dormancy. I can't stand dormancy. I understand the importance of it, and I know that the plants need it. And these plants right here are all in dormancy right now. That's why some of them have, the tint is getting a little more yellowish. They're not looking as healthy as they once were. And it drives me nuts sentencing them to a sort of a cold, dead winter. But it's really important for them to store up energy so that they can come back really strong in the spring. It's just really hard to take your beautiful plants and put them into cold to force them into a dormancy. But that is the part of the process, so we just got to kind of go with it. But so let's talk about the soil here that you're going to need. So first of all, to start off, I can kind of show you what my setup looks like here. I'm going to bring this one over here. It's a little bit bigger so you can see it a little bit better. Basically what I have here is I ran out of my own personal soil that was already kind of soaked. So I had to go get some from a big box store. I went and got some peat moss from Lowe's, some perlite from Lowe's, and I had some silica sand left over, so I didn't need to buy that. But the problem is even though that this peat moss says right on the label that it's 100% pure sphagnum peat moss with no additional additives, as well as the perlite says it's 100% perlite with no additives, you can see on the screen here that as I'm soaking this, after the first soak, it's coming up as pretty hazardous for Venus flytraps. I think it came up like as a 156, you'll be able to see in the video there. But that's actually probably a little bit of a death sentence for Venus flytraps. They might get through that, but they're probably going to be a little sickly before they get healthy until this flushes itself out a little bit. So one thing that's really important is that you flush your soil and use a TDS meter. I'll show you a TDS meter here, right here. Use this TDS meter, that's what you're seeing in the video there. Use this TDS meter to measure. You want to get that under 50. If you can get it under 50, you're probably okay. I like to get mine under 20, so I kept running this until I was well under 20. But it's really important that you do that. Even if it says 100% pure peat sphagnum moss, there's no additives, it still has some crud on it that you're going to want to get off that may be toxic to your plants. I rinsed that with distilled water. So that water was 0 going in and it came out at 156, and all it was ran through was this supposedly no additive peat moss. So make sure you're rinsing your soil. Also, I'm in the process of creating my own soil and getting ready to sell it. It's still in the process of that. I'm working on it. So check the link in the description. If I'm doing it, I'm happy. Check it out. If I'm not yet, keep on a lookout for it. But I'm going to be selling my soil. It's all going to be completely pre-rinsed, so you don't have to worry about this step. So when you get the soil in the mail, boom, you throw it in your pot, you soak it till the peat moss gets wet, and you're ready to go. You don't have to sit in a sink and rinse it over and over continuously. So make sure and check the link in the description. Hopefully by the time you see this, I'm selling my soil. If I'm not yet, I'm sorry. It is on the way. It's coming. I'm putting it through a lot of tests and stuff, so I want to make sure that I'm selling a really, really good product. But so basically what you want to do here, one of the things about Venus flytraps is they're not necessarily a plant that needs a lot of humidity. So the nice thing about once they get to be adults, you can grow them in low humidity areas just fine. If they do have some high humidity, that's fine. It doesn't hurt them. It's totally okay to have some high humidity. However, when you're growing from seeds, or you're growing flower stalks, or you're growing them from leaf cuttings, you do want to have a lot of high humidity. That high humidity will certainly help this process. It's not necessary 100%. You can actually get hits without the humidity, but I've noticed an incredible acceleration in growth of the plant when I do insert some humidity. So what I like to do is, as you can see in the clip above, I like to cut these little plastic planters here that you get like at garden centers with vegetables or flowers or whatever in them. And I like to cut them just below this little Rubbermaid plastic dish here you can get for like $5 on Amazon. I'll link in the description for all the stuff that I show you in this video as well too. If you want to buy this stuff, the setup, I have a link in the description so you can get completely set up to do this. But you cut these down a little bit, and then what we're going to do, and I actually forgot to bring it down, but what we're going to do is we're going to cover this with like plastic saran wrap. And what that's going to do is that's going to create a little terrarium type situation for these, and we're going to keep it in that little terrarium for probably the first 60 to 90 days to really stimulate that growth. And then once they start to take off and they get to be a little bit bigger, then we can remove that dome and we don't have to have that high humidity necessarily. But what this does is, this planter being down here, it gives you that opportunity to put this down in here, cover it, give yourself a little extra room, so if you want to put one up and down, you can. And then the nice thing is that it creates that little dome. And then what you can do is, as the days go on, you can start poking holes in it to give it a little more air. And having that high humidity when they're at this stage is just really, really important. And it'll really, really help speed up the growth. So check out this flower stalk here. Look at this thing. This thing is a beefcake. Look how thick that is. I don't know if it's probably kind of hard to tell in the video, but you can see that this is a thick flower stalk. It's one of the biggest I've ever seen in terms of thickness. It's pretty tall too, but really, really thick. So these flower stalks are super healthy. The thickness and the strength of your flower stalk will kind of determine sometimes whether or not you get a hit. If you have a really small, kind of flimsy flower stalk, sometimes you won't get a great hit on these, so it is kind of hit and miss. But usually with these strong flower stalks like this, you're almost guaranteed to get something with one of the cuttings, and we'll be doing the cuttings here in just a second. So if you're growing these inside, which I actually kind of recommend, because it's almost better growing these inside because you can really control your temperature, you can control your lighting. You can grow them outside, put them out in full sun. It is wintertime right now for most people, so I know that's difficult for some. However, if you want to grow these inside for the first 30 to 90 days and then put them outside, sometimes that's a really good way to do it. This bulb right here, this is a Sansi 36 watt bulb. This is a great bulb for starting off Venus flytraps with flower stalk propagation, or any type of propagation for that matter. You want to put this about 8 inches away from your flower stalks with the saran wrap, and this light bulb right here will give you the light that you need, the powerful light that you need for your Venus flytraps. This is a 36 watt bulb, and it actually plugs into just your standard light socket. So if you already have a lamp that kind of bends over, you know, will point this down at them, you can just use that lamp. Or they do have those like aluminum clamp lights that you can get on Amazon that are really convenient for setting up a light for your Venus flytrap. So there's a link in the description for that. I think they're usually around like between 30 and 40 bucks, but they last a long time. I have a couple in there. This one finally died. I think this one was on year 3 that I've been using that for like 12 hours a day. So you can see that they do last you a really long time. You're looking at probably an investment every 2 or 3 years for those, that 30 or 40 bucks, that price point. So it's not like your standard bulb that'll go out in a few months. Those are really long use light bulbs, so definitely check those out. But so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to throw my camera on the tripod, because we're going to start the process of cutting these and then getting them in the soil, and I'll show you everything that I do, and I'll give you some tips and tricks to make sure that this process is successful for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and start cutting the flower stalk. So this is the kind of the fun part, I guess you could say, or kind of the nerve-wracking part, because it's always kind of nerve-wracking when you're trimming or cutting your precious carnivorous plants, but it is necessary for this, so you just want to kind of be careful. This one's making it real easy on me. You can see I got a nice big wide opening here. Sometimes it's not that easy. Like if you look at this plant here, like this is going to be a little more nerve-wracking when I go to cut these, because I got to get down in there kind of in between. I'm probably going to set off a few traps, and I'm going to be annoyed. But I think this one's going to be pretty easy because I got a nice big entrance here, big door. You just want to make sure, you see those little guys growing in there? You just want to make real sure that you don't, I'm going to bring this over so you can see that a little bit better. You just want to make real sure that you don't cut anything that's growing up, because you don't want to cut off any new growth. And even though these are in dormancy, there's still a chance that that'll pop up a little bit and grow just a little. So I don't really want to cut off anything that's growing. If you do happen to cut off one of these, what I recommend is just going ahead and throwing it in the planter with your flower stalks, because there's a decent chance under the exact same conditions that these leaf cuttings will also propagate. So if you do happen to cut one off on accident, just use it for another propagation attempt, so it's not a total waste. All right, so what you want to do is you really want to get down pretty low here. I don't go super low. I used to say get as low as you can, but actually I recommend just kind of getting right down to here. See, it's going to be tricky because it's so thick. There we go. So I'll take a couple cuts. There we go. Yeah, look how thick that one is. And actually, what you really want to do, and now it's tricky when you get them off, but once you get it to here, you want to get this a nice angle. And when you cut these, you want to make sure that you give them really good angles, because that gives them more surface area here. If this is going to hit, usually it's the ends that hit. So this surface area being exposed right here will give this a better opportunity to hit. So there we go. We got our first flower stalk. Pretty cool. So now what you want to do, now you want to cut these into about 1 inch. So this one right here, this one's really hardened down here, so I don't know that this one's going to do good, but I'm still going to give it a shot. So we're going to go about 1 inch here. This is a really cool little scissor kit too. I get these scissors and this little scissor and tweezer kit. These are so handy, these little precision scissors for trimming your Venus flytraps. Sometimes you use the scissors to cut away dead growth or like flower stalks, or sometimes you can just get in there with these tweezers, and these tweezers do a really good job of grabbing stuff and pulling it out, especially after you've cut it off. Or sometimes you can just pull off the dead ones. They don't give much resistance. You just want to make sure not pull your plant out of the pot. But all right, so let's see here. So there's one. Let's go about there. You can see it has a lot of, I actually didn't cut that first one at an angle like I should have, so let's cut it at an angle here. And I'm actually going to make 2 kind of bigger ones out of these last 2 because I don't want to get it too short. So in this one, I always plant these ones up and down. Personally, I do like to put them down into the ground. I've had more success this way than I have planted up and down, so I put most of them in that way, and I put these ones in right side up like this. So there's no, I don't have any like scientific proof or anything on what works better. I do know both ways do work because I've had hits both ways. I've just always kind of done them laying down and I've had success, so I continue to do it that way. I'm confident that if you plant them into the flower or into the pot like this, up and down vertically, you're probably going to get a hit. So I think it's whatever you kind of choose, whatever you want to do. So now that we got our first cuttings here, I'm going to move these over to the side for just a second. And one extra step here. Now with my soil, this is something I didn't talk about yet. You can see all this perlite in here, and this perlite kind of rose to the top a little bit because I was soaking this with a sprayer. What happens is this kind of rises up. So what I like to do is I also soaked some extra peat moss here. And then what I do is I like to have my aeration down here. That's really important. But then for this little top layer here, I'm actually going to go ahead and just do a pure peat moss layer. And the reason that I do that is pretty specific. There's a good reason for it, is that these do better if the flower stalk actually is in contact with the peat moss. So with that perlite in there and the sand, it makes it a little bit harder for it to be in actual contact with the substrate. So if you do one layer up here at the top that's just peat moss, it's much easier for your flower stalk to be in contact with that substrate, because I think that that's pretty important. So let's go ahead and I'll do this one first here because I'm going to be planting this one up and down. Honestly, the main reason I plant these ones up and down and not the other ones is kind of silly. It's that they will actually continue to bloom. So if I plant this up and down, I actually get to watch this flower stalk bloom, and I think that's kind of fun. So after a few days, I almost guarantee you that this flower stalk right here is going to bloom and bloom a nice pretty flower, and that way I still get to see it flower, but I'm also propagating at the same time, so it's kind of the best of both worlds. I just don't get seeds. But so there we go. And then these ones here, I'm going to lay down around it. Now what you want to do is, this is kind of tricky. I'm going to bring this out here so you can see it, but what you want to do is you want to make sure that the ends are kind of covered a little bit, not the whole thing, but just the ends, and you want to push it down into the substrate a little bit because you really want a lot of this flower stalk to be in contact with your substrate. You could probably dig a little pre-trench if you want to go that route. That's a little more work. It takes a little more time. I just didn't want to do that right now, but you can totally do that if you want. That does kind of help a little bit, but there you go. And I'm going to go ahead and get through this so you guys don't have to sit here and watch this whole process. There you go. You can see that they're all in there. I decided to throw the last one in there kind of up and down. So just for good measure, I figure why not? We'll give it another try. Both I think work, so give it another try. We'll see what happens. All right, here is my B52. And after that, guys, honestly, rinse and repeat. Because there's not much in my way. Boom. Uh-oh. Let's try not to set off that trap. Okay. So another question that I get really commonly is, when's the best time to cut a Venus flytrap for propagation? And I actually waited a little bit too long. You see how these are kind of hardened at the bottom? If I'd have cut these probably a week ago, they wouldn't have been so hard at the bottom, and I probably could have used the entire flower stalk. But I also was kind of trying to make it last long enough so I got a little more height on them so that I could get a few more cuttings. So I just try to do it before the flower blooms. I have had them work after the flower bloom before, so it's not impossible for it to work after the flower blooms, but they do have a much higher success rate if you get them in there before the flowers bloom. Usually like 2 weeks before the flowers bloom is kind of the best time, and these are probably a week or two away from blooming, maybe a week, so I might be just a little late on that. I guess one thing to note that's a pro about putting them up and down is you can actually do a lot more. It takes up a lot less space. So if you found that method works good for you and you have a ton of flower stalks, maybe that makes more sense. Definitely a space saving tip if you want to go that route. This is my A2 Fang. Got this one off Etsy. This is a beautiful plant that they sent me off Etsy, man. This is a dandy. I love this Venus flytrap. This one almost didn't make it because it was in the mail too long, and I have a video all about that if you guys want to go check that out. That was an interesting thing. It was in the mail for like 11-12 days because it got lost and moved and whatever, but I know that I'm empathetic to the Postal Service because I know they're super short-staffed right now, and I know people are out there being upset, so maybe just a quick word to everybody. Try to be kind to people out there working retail. it's tough right now. There's a lot of people not working. There's a lot of shortage of staff, and I've seen some really nasty people out there in the retail. So just try to be empathetic to those people. They're trying, they're working, they're doing their best, and try to be kind whenever you can. I think that's really important. So one of the reasons it's really important to kind of mist these from the top and give them a really good watering is, especially for these ones here, that soil needs to settle, that substrate needs to settle down around these. Since I poked a hole, that those may not be touching very well, especially at the bottom. So you really want these ones to get watered really well from the top, and that'll make sure that the substrate sort of settles really nicely. And I did already flush these, so I know that the substrate at the bottom is very settled. But you can see now, what's nice is now I have a little basin of water down in there. And what happens is when you cover these, that basin of water stays in there for a lot longer because the water stays in there. So you don't have to really water these very often. If you leave them uncovered, they'll still work, they'll do fine, but you have to make sure and water them. Or you can actually probably leave these not watered for 30 days, and this will stay in here for most of that time if you leave them covered. One thing to note that's really important, when you start seeing signs of mold pop up, if you don't have good airflow wherever you're keeping these, if you have good airflow, you're probably not gonna have a problem, especially if you're opening them up once or twice a day. Let them get good airflow, put it back on. But if you start to see some mold pop up, go ahead and just take the lid off more. Maybe leave it off for 4 hours a day and leave it on for 4 hours a day. Or I guess not 4 hours, but maybe take it off for 10 hours and then put it back on overnight, something along those lines. And then try to get some airflow because that airflow will help avoid the mold. You can also pick the little pieces of mold out of here and discard it because you really don't want that mold to spread, because sometimes mold will spread to the actual flower stalks and it'll kill that flower stalk off. Mold is almost inevitable sometimes, so you're going to kind of have to deal with that just a little bit. Sometimes what happens though too, which is kind of cool, is you get this sphagnum moss growing, this kind of ground cover here, which is, it looks really cool. It's got a really nice aesthetic. It is kind of a pain in the butt because it will kind of battle with the Venus flytraps. So you don't want it to completely take over. You do want to repot it at some point, but in the meantime, it makes a really beautiful aesthetic. I mean, you can see, like, look at those sawtooths right there, man. That's just so cool. I love the green sphagnum moss around that. That's really cool. So, but yeah. So I didn't cover these yet, but if you can imagine just taking a piece of like cling wrap, putting it right over the top, that's basically it, they're done. So, and then get a good grow light. If you're not in the summertime, put it about 6 inches, 6 to 8 inches above these, and give them about 10 to 12 hours a day of light. If you can get your hands on a timer like this, it'll make your life much easier. There's a link in the description. You can set this puppy on 12 hours and then you can almost set it and forget it. You just got to remember to kind of cover them and uncover them. It's kind of a bummer when you forget to turn your light on or you forget to turn your light off. It stresses you out. You're wondering if it's going to kill them. So getting that timer definitely takes some of the guesswork out of it and makes your life a little bit easier. I think that kind of covers everything. If you guys have any questions, throw it in the comments. I love interacting with my community. If you guys have better methods, throw them out there. I'd love to discuss it and talk about it. Maybe it's something I can try in the future. If you have any questions about any of the steps that I've done here, man, let me know. Like I love having the conversations with you guys. I've met some really cool people from this channel, and I continue to meet really cool people, and I just love being able to interact with everybody. I love helping people with their carnivorous plants. I love the help that I get with my carnivorous plants. Sometimes I'm doing something that's like completely wrong, and I get some good information from some people that are really experienced in growing, and they see my videos and they're kind enough to offer me some advice, and I'm totally an open book when it comes to advice. I have a very open mind, so please hit me up, ask questions, give me advice, and yeah, let's talk about it. But thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel so you can get an update on these once I have some hits. I'll make sure and update and show you what's going on. But definitely subscribe to the channel so you can do that. Give it a like. That helps me out a ton, and I appreciate you so much. And I really hope to catch you guys in my next video. Bye.